Flight 451 from Atlanta to Seattle pushed back from the gate at 2:15 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon, carrying 168 passengers and a crew of 6. Captain Jennifer Walsh, 43 years old with 18 years of airline experience, completed her pre-flight checks with First Officer Marcus Chen beside her in the right seat. Marcus was 31, talented and capable with 6 years at the airline. They'd flown together several times before and had developed the easy communication of a well-matched crew. Everything was routine, professional, comfortable as they taxied toward the runway. Neither of them knew that in 90 minutes Jennifer would be alone in the cockpit flying a damaged aircraft through a thunderstorm with 168 lives depending entirely on her. Aaron settled into seat 14B, pulling out his tablet to work on an article during the 5-hour flight. The passenger next to him, a businessman already absorbed in his laptop, barely acknowledged him. The cabin filled with the typical sounds of a departing flight, luggage being stowed, children asking questions, flight attendants going through safety demonstrations. Everything was perfectly ordinary. Aaron had flown this route dozens of times. He expected nothing but routine hours of work followed by landing in Seattle for a conference. He had no idea he was about to witness one of the most remarkable feats of airmanship in modern aviation history. The takeoff was smooth, the climb through Atlanta's afternoon sky uneventful. Jennifer and Marcus ran through their after-takeoff checklists, settled into cruise climb, monitored weather ahead. A line of thunderstorms stretched across Tennessee, nothing unusual for spring in the South. They'd need to deviate around the worst cells, but nothing they hadn't done hundreds of times before. Jennifer engaged the autopilot and allowed herself to relax slightly. "Want to take first break?" she asked Marcus. He nodded. "Sure, I'll grab some coffee, stretch my legs, be back in 15. He unbuckled and headed to the lavatory, standard procedure for long flights. Pilots took breaks in rotation so someone was always at the controls. But here's what nobody knew. Marcus Chen had been feeling slightly off for the past few days. Mild headaches, occasional dizziness, nothing severe enough to ground himself over. He'd chalked it up to stress and poor sleep. What Marcus didn't know was that he had an undiagnosed brain aneurysm, a weak spot in a blood vessel that had been slowly expanding. The pressure changes during ascent had stressed that weakened vessel. And now, as Marcus stood in the lavatory 90 minutes into the flight, that aneurysm ruptured. Jennifer was reviewing weather radar when she heard the thud. It came from the direction of the forward lavatory, a heavy impact like someone falling. She immediately pressed the intercom button for the flight attendant. "Is everything okay out there? I heard something fall." Lead flight attendant Sarah Martinez's voice came back immediately. "Captain, First Officer Chen just collapsed in the lavatory. He's unconscious. We're pulling him out now." Jennifer's blood ran cold. "Get him onto the floor, check for breathing and pulse. I'm calling for medical assistance." Jennifer grabbed the passenger address system. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. If there is a doctor or medical professional on board, please identify yourself immediately to the flight attendants. We have a medical emergency." She quickly switched frequencies to air traffic control. "Atlanta Center, Flight 451. We have a medical emergency. My first officer has collapsed and is unconscious. Requesting priority routing to nearest suitable airport and medical assistance on arrival." The controller's voice came back immediately, professional but concerned. "Flight 451, copy medical emergency. Stand by for routing. Can you continue as pilot in command?" Jennifer's mind raced through the situation. Marcus was down, possibly having a stroke or heart attack. That meant she was alone in the cockpit of a Boeing 737 carrying 168 souls, still 3 hours from Seattle with thunderstorms ahead. Yes, she was fully qualified to fly single pilot if necessary. But regulations required 2 pilots for commercial operations precisely because emergencies like this could happen. She had no backup. If something went wrong, if she became incapacitated, if the aircraft had mechanical issues, she'd have to handle everything alone while also managing the emergency of her unconscious co-pilot. "Affirmative, I can continue as PIT, Jennifer responded, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her chest. "But be advised, I am now single pilot in the cockpit. I'll need maximum assistance from ATC." The controller understood immediately. Single pilot operations in commercial aircraft were rare and dangerous. "Flight 451, you're cleared direct Nashville. Priority handling, all traffic deviating around you. We're your second set of eyes. Whatever you need, ask." Jennifer felt a wave of gratitude for that controller's calm professionalism. In the cabin, 2 passengers had identified themselves as doctors. Dr. Lisa Park, an emergency medicine physician, and Dr. Robert Sanders, a neurologist, were both kneeling beside Marcus's unconscious body in the galley. Lisa checked his pulse and breathing. Pulse is thready and irregular. Breathing is shallow. Pupils are unequal. Robert leaned closer, his face grim. "This looks like a catastrophic brain event, stroke or aneurysm. We need to get him to a hospital immediately." Sarah relayed this to Jennifer over the intercom. "Captain, the doctors think it's a stroke or brain hemorrhage. They say he needs immediate hospital care." Jennifer processed this information while simultaneously monitoring the weather radar, managing the autopilot, and calculating her options. Nashville was 45 minutes away. That was too long if Marcus was dying, but there wasn't another suitable airport closer. She made the decision. Tell the doctors to do whatever they can to stabilize him. We're going to Nashville as fast as I can get us there safely. She pushed the throttles forward, increasing speed to maximum safe cruise, and began a gradual descent to get ahead of the curve for landing. Every second counted. But wait, this is where everything got exponentially worse. As Jennifer concentrated on flying the aircraft and managing the emergency, the weather system she'd been tracking intensified rapidly. What had been a line of moderate thunderstorms morphed into severe storms with hail, extreme turbulence, and lightning. The cells were building right along her route to Nashville. She couldn't go around them. That would add 30 minutes Marcus didn't have. She couldn't go under them, too dangerous at her current altitude. She'd have to go through them, alone. In a plane with an unconscious co-pilot and 168 terrified passengers, Aaron felt the plane accelerate and begin descending more steeply than normal. Around him, passengers were murmuring in concern. Flight attendants were hurrying through the cabin with serious expressions, securing everything loose, preparing the cabin for rough conditions. Then the captain's voice came over the speakers, and her tone made everyone stop talking. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Walsh. My first officer has had a medical emergency and is receiving care from doctors on board. We are diverting to Nashville where medical personnel will meet the aircraft. We are also going to be flying through some weather that may be rough. I need everyone to remain seated with seatbelts fastened until we land. Flight attendants, secure the cabin immediately and take your seats." The cabin erupted in anxious chatter. Aaron's seatmate closed his laptop, his face pale. Did she just say the co-pilot is down? That means she's flying alone? Aaron nodded, his own stomach clenched with fear. Flying through storms was scary enough with two pilots. With one pilot managing both the emergency and the aircraft, the danger multiplied exponentially. He looked out the window and saw dark clouds building ahead, lightning flickering inside them. They were heading straight into that. Jennifer gripped the controls as the first wisps of cloud surrounded the aircraft. She'd switched from autopilot to manual control, needing the direct feel of the airplane. Her 18 years of experience would be tested now like never before. She keyed the radio. "Nashville approach, Flight 451 is entering the weather system. Single pilot in cockpit. Will need continuous updates on weather cells and direct vectors for approach. I cannot do multiple frequency changes or complex routing." The controller's voice came back immediately. "Flight 451, understood. You'll stay with me all the way to landing. I'm clearing all other traffic. You're my only priority." The first jolt of turbulence hit like a giant fist, throwing the aircraft up and then down. In the cabin, passengers screamed. Loose items flew. Aaron gripped his armrests, his knuckles white. In the cockpit, Jennifer fought the controls, anticipating each movement, staying ahead of the turbulence. But she was also alone. Normally, her first officer would be calling out altitude deviations, monitoring systems, managing communications while she flew. Now she had to do everything. Fly the plane, monitor instruments, talk to ATC, process weather information, all while being thrown around by turbulence so severe it felt like the plane was being torn apart. A massive updraft threw them up 1,000 feet in seconds. Jennifer pushed the nose down to compensate, but then a downdraft slammed them back down even harder. The airspeed indicator swung wildly. The artificial horizon tumbled. Alarms sounded, overspeed, altitude deviation, wind shear. Jennifer's hands flew across panels, silencing non-critical alarms, correcting the flight path, keeping the aircraft under control. Her training had prepared her for this theoretically, but the reality was overwhelming. She was drowning in stimuli, in decisions, in corrections that needed to be made simultaneously. You won't believe what happened next. A lightning strike hit the left wing tip, the explosion deafening even in the insulated cockpit. The aircraft lurched violently. Multiple warning lights illuminated. The number 1 engine fire warning light came on. Jennifer's heart seized. Engine fire. She needed to run the engine fire checklist, but the checklist required 2 pilots, one to fly, one to manage the emergency. She was alone. She had to fly the aircraft through continuing severe turbulence, while also handling an engine fire. This was the nightmare scenario every pilot trained for but prayed would never happen. Jennifer's training took over. Muscle memory, prioritization, aviate, navigate, communicate, the fundamental rule of flying. First, keep the aircraft flying. She maintained control despite the turbulence and the asymmetric thrust from the potential engine fire. Second, navigate. She stayed on course for Nashville, now only 20 minutes away, but feeling like hours. Third, communicate. She keyed the radio with her left hand, while her right stayed on the yoke. Nashville approach. Flight 451. I have an engine fire warning on number 1. Shutting down number 1 engine. Single pilot, in severe weather. I need every bit of help you can give me. The controller's voice remained calm, a lifeline in the chaos. Flight 451, Roger. Fire equipment standing by. You're cleared direct runway 2 right. Straight in approach, no turns, maximum spacing behind you. We're going to get you on the ground. Jennifer ran the engine fire checklist from memory, shutting down the left engine, deploying the fire extinguisher. The fire warning light went out. The engine was secured, but now she was flying on one engine through a thunderstorm while handling a medical emergency with her incapacitated co-pilot somewhere behind her in the cabin. The cognitive load was crushing. She felt like her brain was short-circuiting. Too many inputs, too many decisions. In the cabin, passengers were terrified. The turbulence was violent, the lightning constant. People were crying, praying, some vomiting from motion sickness. Aaron watched the flight attendants, all strapped into their jump seats, faces showing their own fear but maintaining composure. Sarah Martinez caught Aaron's eye and gave him a tiny nod, trying to project confidence she probably didn't feel. Aaron nodded back, appreciating the effort even though they both knew how bad this situation was. Dr. Park and Dr. Sanders had strapped Marcus to a row of seats using seatbelts, doing everything possible to stabilize him while being thrown around by turbulence. Marcus remained unconscious, his breathing shallow, his prognosis grim. "We're losing him," Lisa said to Sarah. "Even if we land in the next few minutes, I don't know if he'll survive." Sarah relayed this to Jennifer over the intercom, her voice breaking slightly. Jennifer received the information but couldn't process the emotion. She couldn't think about Marcus as a friend, as a colleague, as a person. Right now, he was just one of many problems she had to manage. The compartmentalization was brutal but necessary. The storm began to ease slightly as they descended through 15,000 feet. The turbulence lessened from severe to moderate, then to light. Jennifer could breathe slightly easier. Her muscles, which had been tensed for 30 minutes of fighting the controls, began to relax microscopically. The runway at Nashville appeared through the clouds, a beautiful sight, salvation visible. Flight 451, runway 2, right in sight, cleared to land, wind 320 at 15 gusting 25. Jennifer acknowledged and began the landing checklist, running through it from memory since Marcus wasn't there to call out items. But this is what almost ended everything. At 500 feet above the runway, just seconds from touchdown, Jennifer felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. The stress, the adrenaline, the cognitive overload, it all hit her at once. Her vision tunneled, her hands felt weak on the controls. She was on the edge of passing out, right at the most critical moment of the flight. If she lost consciousness now, the aircraft would crash. Everyone would die. Marcus's sacrifice would be meaningless. She bit down hard on her tongue, using pain to shock herself back to alertness, tasted blood, forced her eyes to focus, gripped the controls harder. 400 feet, 300. The runway grew larger. Jennifer's training carried her through the landing, even as her conscious mind fought to stay present. 200 feet, 100. Flare, touchdown. The main gear hit the runway with a solid thump. She deployed thrust reversers on the single working engine, applied brakes, brought the crippled aircraft to a stop on the runway. Fire trucks surrounded them immediately, spraying foam on the hot engine. Medical personnel rushed aboard. Jennifer sat in the cockpit, shaking uncontrollably, unable to move, unable to process that it was over, that she'd actually done it. The Nashville Tower controller's voice came through her headset, thick with emotion. "Flight 451, that was one hell of a piece of flying. Get yourself and your passengers taken care of. You're a hero, Captain." Jennifer couldn't respond. She just sat there, hands still gripping the yoke, tears streaming down her face. Sarah Martinez appeared in the cockpit doorway. "Captain, are you okay? Captain Walsh?" Jennifer finally looked up, released the controls, and let Sarah help her out of the seat. Her legs barely held her weight. She'd been operating on pure adrenaline and training for the last hour. Now, with the crisis over, her body was shutting down. Marcus Chen was rushed off the aircraft to a waiting ambulance. Doctors later confirmed he'd suffered a massive brain aneurysm rupture. The fact that he survived the initial event was remarkable. The fact that Jennifer had gotten him to a hospital in under an hour, cutting what would have been a 3-hour flight to Seattle down to less than 1 hour to Nashville, by flying maximum speed through a severe thunderstorm with an engine out, gave him the only chance he had at survival. Marcus spent 3 weeks in a coma, underwent multiple surgeries, and faced months of rehabilitation. But he lived. Against enormous odds, he lived. The passengers of Flight 451 deplaned in Nashville, many on shaking legs, some kissing the ground, all acutely aware of how close they'd come to dying. Aaron deplaned in a daze, his mind struggling to process what he'd just experienced. He'd been on a flight where the co-pilot had collapsed, where they'd flown through the worst storm he'd ever experienced, where the engine had been struck by lightning and caught fire, and where a single pilot had somehow managed all of that and landed them safely. It seemed impossible. But it had happened. He'd lived through it. The FAA and NTSB investigation that followed concluded that Captain Jennifer Walsh had demonstrated airmanship of the highest order. Captain Walsh faced a cascade of emergencies that would challenge any pilot, the report stated. Loss of her co-pilot, severe weather, engine failure, single-pilot operations in a multi-pilot aircraft. She prioritized correctly, managed her resources perfectly, made no errors despite enormous stress and cognitive load, and completed a safe landing with 0 passenger injuries. This is a textbook example of superior pilot decision-making and execution under extreme duress. But here's what Jennifer said when interviewed by investigators and media. "I didn't do anything special. I just did my job. Yes, it was hard. Yes, I was scared. But I had a plane full of people depending on me. I had Marcus depending on me to get him to medical care. Failure wasn't an option, so I didn't fail. Any pilot would have done the same." The investigator shook his head. "Captain Walsh, with all due respect, not every pilot could have done what you did. Your humility is admirable, but your skill saved lives. Accept that." Aaron's article about Flight 451, titled "Alone in the Cockpit: One Captain's Fight to Save Her Crew and Passengers," became one of the most widely read aviation stories of the year. It detailed not just the technical aspects of what Jennifer had done, but the psychological burden of being solely responsible for so many lives, of watching your co-pilot collapse, and having to compartmentalize that human tragedy to focus on flying. Jennifer Walsh became captain, co-pilot, navigator, and crisis manager simultaneously, Aaron wrote. She flew a crippled aircraft through a severe thunderstorm while managing an engine fire and a medical emergency. She did the work of 3 people alone, and she never faltered. That's not just skill. That's extraordinary courage. The airline industry took notice. Jennifer's handling of the emergency became a case study in pilot training programs worldwide. Captain Walsh's performance demonstrates why we train to such high standards, airline training captains would tell students. She had the technical skills to fly the aircraft in extreme conditions. She had the judgment to prioritize correctly. She had the mental fortitude to push through fear and cognitive overload. And she had the physical endurance to maintain control when her body wanted to give up. This is what we're training you to become. Marcus Chen recovered slowly but steadily. The aneurysm rupture had caused significant brain damage, affecting his memory and motor skills. He would never fly commercially again. His medical certificate was permanently revoked. But he was alive, walking, talking, able to hug his wife and 2 children. Jennifer visited him regularly during his rehabilitation. "You saved my life," Marcus told her during one visit, his speech still slightly slurred but improving. "I heard the doctors say you got me to the hospital an hour faster than should have been possible. You flew through hell to save me." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "You would have done the same for me. That's what crews do. We take care of each other." Marcus nodded. "I'm sorry I left you alone. I'm sorry you had to handle everything by yourself." Jennifer gripped his hand. "You didn't leave me. Your body failed you. That's not your fault. And I wasn't alone. I had ATC helping me. I had the doctors in the cabin helping you. I had my training and experience. I had everyone pulling together. We saved each other, Marcus. That's the truth." A year after the incident, Jennifer was awarded the Airline Pilots Association Gold Medal for Valor, the highest honor the pilots' union bestows. At the ceremony, surrounded by her fellow pilots and her family, Jennifer gave a speech that Aaron recorded and later included in his book. "I'm accepting this award on behalf of every pilot who's ever faced an emergency alone. Every pilot who's ever had to make impossible decisions under crushing pressure. Every pilot who's ever been scared but flew the plane anyway. We train for worst-case scenarios hoping we'll never face them. On Flight 451, I faced every worst-case scenario at once. And I survived because of my training, because of the support of air traffic controllers, because of the doctors who cared for Marcus, because of the flight attendants who kept passengers calm. This medal isn't just for me. It's for everyone who helped that day." The applause was thunderous. Aaron, sitting in the audience, wiped his eyes. He'd interviewed Jennifer extensively and had come to deeply respect her, not just for her skills but for her humility. She'd saved 168 lives and her co-pilot's life through extraordinary airmanship, yet she consistently deflected credit to others. That, Aaron had learned, was the mark of true heroism. People who did extraordinary things but saw themselves as ordinary people just doing their jobs. 5 years after the incident, Marcus Chen had recovered enough to work as a flight simulator instructor, teaching new pilots from the ground instead of from the cockpit. He used his own experience as a teaching tool. "I collapsed in the lavatory 90 minutes into a routine flight," he'd tell students. "I had no warning, no symptoms serious enough to ground myself. And in an instant, my captain was alone dealing with multiple cascading emergencies. You need to be ready for that. Ready to be the Jennifer Walsh in someone's story. Ready to fly the unflyable, to do the impossible, because lives are depending on you." Jennifer continued flying, now as a training captain herself, mentoring younger pilots and sharing the lessons of Flight 451. She never flew with bravado or ego. She flew with quiet competence and deep respect for the power and danger of the profession she'd chosen. Pilots who flew with her noted that she had an almost supernatural calm in emergencies, having been tested in the worst possible conditions and emerged successfully. Flying with Captain Walsh is like having a safety net, one first officer told Aaron. You know that if things go wrong, she's been through worse and survived. That's reassuring. 10 years after the incident, the Boeing 737 aircraft that Jennifer had flown that day, tail number N8451C, was retired from service. The airline preserved the cockpit and donated it to the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. A plaque beside it read, "This cockpit represents the extraordinary airmanship of Captain Jennifer Walsh, who on date, flew this aircraft alone through severe weather, managed an engine failure, and landed safely after her first officer collapsed from a medical emergency, saving 168 lives. Her performance under extreme duress represents the highest standards of aviation professionalism." Aaron visited the exhibit with Jennifer when it opened. She stood in front of the cockpit she'd sat in during the worst hour of her professional life, memories flooding back. "I can still feel every moment," she told Aaron quietly. "The turbulence throwing me around. The alarm bells ringing. The weight of responsibility crushing my chest. The temptation to just give up because it was too much. But I didn't give up. And that's the lesson I want people to take from this. When life puts you in an impossible situation, when you're alone and overwhelmed and scared, you dig deep. You find strength you didn't know you had. You do the next right thing, then the next, and somehow you get through it." Aaron included Jennifer's reflection in the final chapter of his book titled Alone in the Cockpit. He wrote, "Jennifer Walsh was a good pilot who became a great pilot in one terrible hour. She faced the worst combination of emergencies possible: medical incapacitation of her co-pilot, severe weather, engine failure, single-pilot operations in a multi-crew aircraft. Any one of these emergencies would challenge experienced pilots. Together they should have been unsurvivable, but Jennifer survived. She more than survived, she excelled. She flew with precision, made correct decisions under crushing pressure, and landed safely with 0 passenger injuries. She is living proof that training matters, that experience matters, that mental toughness matters. But mostly, she's proof that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when circumstances demand it." Jennifer didn't think she was a hero. She thought she was just doing her job. But doing your job perfectly when the stakes are life and death, when you're alone and scared and overwhelmed, that's the definition of heroism. 15 years after Flight 451, Jennifer retired from flying at age 58, ready to spend time with her grandchildren and travel as a passenger for once instead of the pilot. At her retirement party, Marcus Chen gave a speech, his recovery remarkable given how close he'd come to death. "Jennifer Walsh saved my life," Marcus said, his voice stronger now, the slurring almost gone. "But more than that, she showed me what it means to be a pilot. It means accepting responsibility for the lives entrusted to you. It means staying calm when everyone else is panicking. It means doing the impossible because there's no other option. Jennifer did all of that for me, for our passengers, for everyone aboard Flight 451. I'm alive because she refused to give up. I can walk and talk and hug my kids because she flew through hell to get me to a hospital. Thank you, Captain Walsh, for everything." Jennifer hugged Marcus, both of them crying, their bond forged in crisis unbreakable even 15 years later. She looked around the room at fellow pilots, flight attendants, passengers from Flight 451 who'd come to celebrate her retirement, her family beaming with pride. "I've had an amazing career," Jennifer said, "but Flight 451 defined me. It taught me that I'm stronger than I thought, that we're all stronger than we think when we have to be. Life will put you in impossible situations. You'll face challenges that seem unsurvivable, but you survive them, you find a way. You do the next right thing." That's all I did that day, the next right thing, over and over, until we were on the ground. And that's all any of us can do in our own emergencies. Just keep doing the next right thing. Eventually you'll land safely. Aaron's final article about Jennifer, published on her retirement, reflected on legacy and impact. Jennifer Walsh flew thousands of flights over her 33-year career, but she'll be remembered for one flight, 1 hour, when everything went wrong and she made it right. That hour defined her professionally, became her legacy, inspired countless pilots. But it also taught everyone who heard the story a valuable lesson. You're stronger than you think. When crisis comes, when you're alone and overwhelmed, you can handle it. You find reserves you didn't know you had. You become the person the situation needs you to be. Jennifer Walsh became that person in the cockpit of Flight 451. She saved lives by refusing to quit. That's heroism. That's courage. That's what we should all aspire to, being capable enough, strong enough, determined enough to handle the worst moment of our lives when it comes, because it will come. And when it does, may we all have the strength Jennifer Walsh showed. The strength to stay calm, make correct decisions, and land safely despite everything going wrong. That's her gift to us, the reminder that we can do hard things. We can survive impossible circumstances. We just have to keep flying, keep fighting, keep doing the next right thing, just like Jennifer did, just like we all can. Captain Jennifer Walsh's legacy lived on in the pilots she trained, the passengers she saved, the story that inspired millions. Flight 451 remained a reminder that commercial aviation's safety record depends on pilots like Jennifer, superbly trained, mentally tough, willing to shoulder enormous responsibility. Most pilots never face an emergency like Jennifer's, but they train for it anyway, just in case. Because someday, somewhere, a co-pilot will collapse, a storm will appear, an engine will fail, and when that moment comes, there needs to be a Jennifer Walsh in the left seat, someone who can fly alone through hell and bring everyone home safely. That's the promise pilots make. That's the standard Jennifer Walsh set. That's why her story matters, and always will. Because it proves that one person, properly trained and determined enough, can save everyone when everything goes wrong. That's not just airmanship. That's heroism. That's everything aviation safety is built on. And that's why, 100 years from now, pilots will still learn about Flight 451 and the captain who refused to fail. Jennifer Walsh, alone in the cockpit, saving lives through skill and will. That's the legend. That's the truth. That's the power of one person doing the impossible when there's no other choice.